F1's expansion is not something that can be stopped now that the sport has reached popularity it only dreamt of a couple of years ago, but it doesn't come without its consequences. The addition of new tracks, although warmly welcomed by the majority of the grid, has met some resilience in one specific area, the tracks being of a street nature. And it seems like F1 is ready to continue this trend in Japan amid the rising concerns that Suzuka might be dropped off the calendar. So is this something that the F1 drivers are going to be okay about, or will they raise their voice against this negative trend? Formula One has been expanding its calendar in the past couple of years due to the increased popularity and interest, but adding circuits like Las Vegas, Jeddah and Qatar has all raised some questions as to whether or not the sport is all about the money and less about the drivers and the fans' wishes. With this in mind, the latest rumour that the F1 circus is going to expand to Osaka, one of the largest cities in Japan, with what seems to be yet another street race, goes to show that legendary tracks like Suzuka might be in danger. As of now, F1 is about to visit 24 races across 21 different countries, which was more or less the plan for the 2023 season as well, had it not been for the cancellation of the Chinese and Imola GP. Nonetheless, the Japanese GP, one that provided some legendary racing throughout the years of the sport, and one that has been highly praised by champions like Alonso, might be in huge danger when it comes to being present on the calendar. The Suzuka GP has been hosting the Japanese GP ever since 1987, but it's safe to say that when it comes to revenue, none of the traditional tracks can measure up to what has been achieved on the street circuits of Las Vegas, Miami, Monaco and Singapore. Obviously, this is the way that the FIA has decided to go due to the fact that they want to bring the sport as close to the fans as possible, with them having unique views as the cars go through the slow corners and adapt themselves right in front of their eyes. But with many drivers being reluctant to let this happen to their sport, it's a huge question mark as to whether or not Osaka would meet the drivers' needs and whether or not it would decrease the popularity of the sport. The Japanese newspaper Sankei.com has reported that a meeting has happened in Osaka's tourism bureau, where moving the Japanese GP there would be the main talking point of the entire meeting. The fact that Suzuka's contract expires in 2024 only adds more fuel to this entire conversation. And when elaborating on this matter in further detail, the chairman of the Osaka Tourism Bureau, Hiroshi Mitsuhata, said the F1 Automotive Series has changed into a business model that can be operated on a private sector basis. We would love to move forward with the invitation. F1 is no longer a standalone motor race, but has turned into a comprehensive entertainment program. If we clear each step by step, it is possible to attract an entrant. We welcome any talk of wanting to take on the challenge of private management. I think there are challenges, but we would like to cooperate as much as possible. There is already a large contingent of fans that are enraged about how the entire Las Vegas GP has affected the sport and the fans around it, with prices skyrocketing when the event was announced. But once the time of execution came, it was evident that the locals were not going to be happy with how the entire circus was going to affect their local businesses. Some of the authorities from Las Vegas private business sectors went on to say that the county was played by the sport as F1 came, collected its money and ran away, and their businesses were left empty-pocketed. And even if you were to look at this entire situation from a driver's, not businessman's perspective, it still makes zero sense to replace one of the most legendary tracks in the sport with a track that might seem like it has a short-term success, but will effectively be prone to a boring show because of its nature and how it goes against all of the values that the sport is fighting for. When talking about this matter, after the Las Vegas GP, Alonso's stance about the street circuits was very vague and clear, as he went on to say, "We need to balance, as we said this week, all drivers. There is not much fun to drive in this kind of circuits at this speed of 360 kilometers an hour with no grip, no visibility, bouncing like hell, you know, these kind of things. I know the show from that side maybe looks good, but these cars are not made to go at corners at 80 kilometers an hour. These corners are made to go in Barcelona, to go in Silverstone, and maximize F1 cars' potential. So I think we need to balance the championship and balance the calendar. I think it's what we are doing, but I don't think that this is the only way to go. Many of the fans and experts brought out the fact that some of the legendary tracks are still long overdue on the return list, such as the South African GP, one that Hamilton vowed to do anything in his power to race at least once here in his career. But it seems like the sport has been quite open as to why the talk to return to Kyalami have shut down. It makes zero financial sense for the sport to pump tons of money into something that might return a very small percentage back. Either way, Ben Mohamed Salim has emphasised the fact that racing in Africa has massive potential to increase the popularity of the sport even further. The question is whether that would be at the expense of expanding the calendar and forcing the drivers to go nearly 30 races in a year. The question is very simple. Where will Formula One expand? As of now, it seems like the African continent does have the upper edge, considering that the sport will be taking a massive risk with Osaka for two reasons. They are replacing a legendary track that has existed for quite some time and has proven some exciting racing moments, and they're doing it with a street circuit, the least popular ones among the fans and the drivers. When talking about bringing the sport back to Africa, Ben Salim said, "We have very good contacts in Africa. There should be more attention on Africa. In Africa, we have a good vice president. We are strengthening the clubs there. In some regions, we start at the grassroots. We call it Motorsport in a box. This is a box that you get from the FIA. It contains very simple equipment such as timing and telephones. Then at least you can do speed tests. If we want to grow there, we can't do it from above. I can't give orders. The water doesn't flow downwards here. It's the other way around. It goes from bottom to top. You have to start at the base. That's why we recently launched Motorsport in a box. We'll send it to you and we'll win you over to motorsport." Obviously, there will be lots of other talks about expansion, especially in the USA, now that Andretti is knocking on the door of the sport. But whether or not the sport would make a proper move to race in Osaka rather than in Suzuka, time will tell. The harsh reality is that this is a proper discussion. It's something that has been put on the table of the official representatives in Osaka, and if there are enough investors to actually go through with this initiative, then the F1 fans and drivers might be looking at the worst possible decision for the sport. Now, the ball is in the court of the drivers and the team principals, who should defend the opinions of those who are putting their lives at risk every time they sit in one of these engineering masterpieces. Obviously, the general stance is very well known, but that didn't stop F1 from organising one of the biggest events in the history of the sport, the legendary Las Vegas GP. And considering that Japan is a wealthy country with a lot of capitalistic companies that would be eager to cash in on F1's momentum, seeing Osaka's street circuit should not surprise us under any circumstances. With this in mind, do you think that F1 is moving in the right direction by replacing Suzuka with Osaka? And more importantly, do you think that this is something they would actually go through with if all criteria is met? Let us know what you think in the comments below.